We are live, 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 live. I hope you can hear me. I, as my clients know, I like to change it up a bit, and I switched offices today, although I still have all the same furniture and it's still pretty much in the same um, arrangement, so it shouldn't be too chaotic. I'm answering today a question from one of our viewers. Can I say viewers? I don't know. One of the people who follow the page who's named Nicole. How do we tell our therapists it's not working? Collective inhale, exhale. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Rika Pearl. I'm a licensed professional counselor in Colorado, and I specialize in sexual trauma and gender. I also do all sorts of non-specialized counseling work. And I do Facebook Lives in order to answer questions that folks don't feel like they can ask their own therapist, or they don't have a therapist and they're looking for one and they're like, how do I even do this therapy business? So that's why I am here. The first thing about this, how do I tell my therapist it's not working, is there's no such thing as a stupid question ever in therapy. There is no such thing as oversharing ever in therapy. And let me give it a little disclaimer of, just because I say it doesn't mean all therapists agree with it. And just because you're here watching me doesn't mean we're in a therapeutic relationship. This is just for your viewing pleasure. So I'm of the mind that, I am a humanistic psychotherapist. So what that means is that it's all about the human connection. It's all about you as a human, me as a human, and us connecting and talking and helping you solve your problems, know yourself better, go deep, resolve trauma, whatever. So with that in mind, it makes complete sense, doesn't it, that if I have a client who is in a place where they feel like therapy is not working anymore, for whatever reason, they might not even know what the reason is. That might just be normal kind of lulling. I'm kind of at a plateau in my therapeutic work. It is normal, number one. I held up two thumbs and I said number one. Number one and two, apparently. It's normal to have a plateau and growth. It's normal in life. It's normal in therapy. And that's part of what therapy is, right? It's a reflection of life. And the way that you exist in relationships is how you will eventually exist in your therapy room. So when you're growing, you do constantly grow, of course, but it's not always at the same rate. You're not always like grow, 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 grow. Sometimes you're like grow, la 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 la, la 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 la, right? And so I like to think of it kind of as like, actually, this is the first time I've ever thought of this. So, but kind of like if you celebrate Christmas and when you were a little kid, you have all of this expectation, and then you have this big, like, what's the theater word for it? Amy just joined in, so I know that she would know, but there's a theater word for it, where you have all of this like super duper excitement, and it's at the tippity top of the excitement peak experience, if you will, where you're opening all these presents and you're getting all these presents and you're playing with all these presents and it's so great. And then like the rest of the day is kind of like, yeah, so are we gonna, what happens now? Like, do we eat or hang out in our pajamas? I'm like, what's happening? There's kind of this calm after the storm. It's a little bit of like a lull, plateau, a de-excitement period, de-escalation period, if you will. And that's normal, right? You can't have peak experiences without coming back to some kind of baseline. And if you always were at peak experiences, you would, well, you have a trauma disorder. It also wouldn't be interesting anymore, right? It would just be your normal. So, denouement! Thank you, Amy. Thank you. See, I knew she would know. So, denouement, peak experience. So, you have to have all of it, all of the different balances. So back to, how do I tell my therapist that it's not working? So the first thing to know is that it's normal if you experience a plateau in therapy. You may have had a lot of insights, a lot of growth, a lot of changes right away. And if you are one of those people who had that right away, that's awesome, because that's also pretty unique to have a lot of changes right away, unless you're just focusing on problem solving, solution focused therapy. So if you had all this change right away, and then you start to kind of just not notice any changes, again, normal. And sometimes it's not normal, right? Sometimes it's a sign that therapy is, you've outgrown your therapy, you've outgrown your therapist, or you guys have kind of gotten in a nice, comfy little crevice and you're not really doing work anymore, whether that's because you've decided as client unintentionally that you're kind of going back into your old patterns and you're not going to do work anymore, or you're happy where you are and you don't really want to do any work anymore, or the therapist has stopped challenging you, or the therapist has taken you as far as you can go. There's a million reasons why you might want to tell your therapist that things are not working right now. The most important piece of all of these reasons is that you must tell your therapist that it's not working anymore. Sometimes we get into kind of this assumption that a therapist is just gonna know if they're good, and that's just not true. Therapists are human beings. I know, amazing, but we're not mind readers, and there are some things that we might pick up on that the average person wouldn't, because it's kind of our job to be aware, but we're not mind readers. So if you're not sharing with your therapist everything that's going on, or you're intentionally withholding things that are going on around symptoms, around your goals, around your life, whatever, there's no way that a therapist is going to know unless you come into the office and show up very evidently struggling, right? Does that make sense? So, and if your therapist is pushing you and pushing you and pushing you, and you push back and keep pushing back and pushing back and pushing back, there may be a time where the therapist is like, hey, like, they've told me that they are not interested in doing the work that I'm asking of them, so I'm going to back off, and maybe I'll come back later and push, but I'm going to back off for now. And if they've backed off and you're ready for them to come back in and start pushing you again, tell them. All of that to say, the only bad thing about these lives is that I get off track, right? Like, I'm like, woo, all the way over here, and you're like, what? But I guess that's part of my charm. So anyway, the important part is to tell your therapist, because from that point, once you tell them, the two of you can have a conversation about what is the reason that things feel like they're not working in therapy. Are we not a good fit? Like, do you just not jive with my style? Or do I, oh, thanks, Amy. Or do I need to be doing something different that I did at the beginning of therapy, or something that you saw on my website that I've never tried with you and you really want me to? All of those things are super important. And the only way for you to figure it out is to tell your therapist that you've stalled or that things are not working. Sometimes the therapist might bring it up. If they catch it and you haven't talked about it before and you haven't already addressed it, a therapist might be like, hey, what's up? You're not really doing the work. We made this progress and now you're not doing stuff. Let's talk about that. However it comes up, it needs to come up, because no growth will happen if you're not speaking about what is actually going on in the room. So very quickly here at the end is, and hey guys, if questions come up, I noticed a few people joined. If questions come up now or later, or you're rewatching this and questions come up, please tell me. I make these live videos based on what people who watch them tell me that they have questions about. So if this topic's boring, you want to hear something else, let me know. Or if you have other questions about anything therapeutically related or coaching related for that matter, or Reiki related for that matter, or gender or trauma related, whatever, please ask the questions. But real quickly before we end, what specifically can you do if you're feeling anxious? Maybe, I'm not sure if Nicole was feeling anxious when she asked this question on my page or not, but if you're feeling anxious about asking or about telling your therapist that you've stalled in therapy and therapy's not working, use some of the coping skills that hopefully you guys have gone over, or maybe you have from a previous therapeutic relationship, or you just have because you're naturally awesome and cope-tastic. Take some breaths. Maybe to hold yourself accountable, drop your therapist an email and say, hey, I need to talk to you about something that's really hard for me to talk to you about next session. I'm writing you because I want to keep myself accountable. Please ask me about it. Or just come in and say, we need to talk, right? Do not, please, worry about hurting the therapist's feelings. I mean, you can worry if you're a compassionate person, but that's our job as therapists. One of our jobs is to help you have narrative experiences in relationship. That includes very much so you coming to me, for example, and saying, hey, Rika, like, therapy's fabulous and all, but I feel like I'm not getting anywhere. Can we do something else? Or is it time for a break? Or. And those conversations can only happen when you come in. Even if chances are, I or any other therapist who's been paying attention won't be surprised that you're bringing this up. And oftentimes, I will tell you every single time that this has happened in therapy, which hasn't been a lot because it's a hard conversation to have, right? But every single time a client has come and said, what's up? Like, I'm stalled. We're not doing any work. I've been so fucking grateful, you guys. I've been so proud and like flabbergasted and in awe of the strength and the courage. I'm not bullshitting you at all, of the strength and the courage that it takes to come in and tell me as your therapist that we need to do something different. I'm client right now. I'm like, these are my needs. You're not meeting them. Therapy's not meeting them. I'm not meeting them. Whatever. I need to do something different. Can you help me do this? That, you guys, to me, is one of the single most exciting and important therapeutic achievements that I witness people do, because it's a fucking hard thing to bring up, especially if you have a good relationship with your therapist. It's super hard to bring up. Now, if you have an abusive or yucky relationship with your therapist, move on. This is totally a moot point. This conversation is only therapeutic if the relationship is strong, right? And it will get stronger when you have this relationship or when you have this conversation. So take some breaths, write an email to keep yourself accountable, come in and just sit down and say it, or write a letter if you can't say it yet. Then be prepared, because if you have a good therapist or a therapist who isn't close to retirement or something and will just terminate, you're about to have a conversation, and you're about to, if you're open to staying in therapy and sticking it out, if you're able to do that, you're about to grow as you've never grown before, even if that means leaving the relationship. I hope that was helpful, Nicole, and everybody else who tuned in today or is watching on afterwards recording. That's not right anymore, but whatever, later. If you have any questions, let me know. As always, it's an awesome pleasure. I love doing these. Please send me more questions so I can do more.